function as President of the Council, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Madam. One of the colleagues from the 3 states that called for this meeting, particularly the permanent representative of Great Britain, that Syria is broken and is about to die. I would like to reassure him that Syria has never been broken. What he has said is tantamount to the dream of Satan to reach paradise. Mere dreams or wishful thinking that does not reflect the weight of a permanent state on the Council. As for the 3 permanent members together, they sounded as if they were rediscovering the wheel. They discovered that the Syrian government was trying to recapture Aleppo. What a great discovery. As if Aleppo was a town in Djibouti or in Afghanistan, or in Brazil for that matter. I reassure them also that the Syrian government will recapture the whole town of Aleppo, the entire town. If the permanent members in this international organization each have 1 capital, my country has 2 capitals, Damascus and Aleppo. Madam President, if Shakespeare and Jean Genet and Domov and Kafka and the others, the pioneers of the absurd theater, if they were to come among us again, if they were to rise again, they would have written better tragedies and better plays than they had done at their time. They would have never listened to the lies which are similar to the lies told by King Lear. Some of them were mourning the same very dead person that they killed within their own hands, and they weep and they have crocodile tears. The same 3 permanent members who called for our urgent meeting have supported, or rather they aborted 13 times a presidential statement by striking by error the Arab Syrian army or through other actions. But when there was a French terrorist called Mohammed Marrah, who wreaked havoc in Toulouse, the French town Toulouse, he was killed by 300 bullets at the hands of security forces. They did well. However, in Syria, we did not call that French terrorist. We did not call him moderate. Individual of a moderate, belonging to a moderate opposition group. Even if Spain would give away the Basque and France would give away Corsica, the Great Britain would give away Scotland, and the United States would give away Texas. However, the Syrian government will never relinquish 1 inch of our territory in accordance with international law. Madam President, at the request of certain members on this council, we gather today in their attempt to come to the rescue of armed terrorist groups that they falsely call the moderate armed opposition. When they do that, whenever there are indications to the defeat of those groups under the attacks of the Syrian Arab, they forgot what the crime committed by the Nuruddin Zinki, when they chopped the head of Abdullah Isa, the Palestinian child, before your eyes. At that time, that movement was controlling the Hanjarat refugee camp with al-Nusra. We believe that calling for this urgent meeting is a message from those countries that called for this meeting to al-Nusra and the terrorist groups, the other terrorist groups, that the support and the political cover will be sustained and will continue unhindered, and that the weapon of terrorism to put pressure on the Syrian government and its allies continue to be effective. Proceeding from our constitutional responsibility in protecting our citizens from the practices of the armed terrorist groups, which inflicted suffering on our people in Aleppo, the military operation commenced by the Syrian army and its allies 2 days ago included measures in order to maintain the lives of our citizens who were advised to stay away from positions of the armed terrorist groups and to take all measures in order to facilitate their exit and to secure the basic needs of dignified lives for them. These measures included even those who were deceived, who took up arms against the state. On the other hand, the terrorist groups continue to prevent civilians from leaving Aleppo with a view to using them as human shields. We know that there are more than 2 million citizens who are the inhabitants of Aleppo, with 750,000 in East Aleppo. At the same time, my country condemns the use of internationally prohibited weaponry, and we stress that all military operations conducted by the Syrian army and its allies on Syrian territories uphold the UN Charter and international laws, as well as the resolutions of this Council on combating terrorism. We denounce the fabricated accusations leveled by certain members of this council, including, in addition rather, to senior UN officials against the Syrian army and its allies by alleging that we use internationally prohibited weaponry or we target deliberately citizens. It is really odd, it is odd indeed, that the UNSG and his senior assistants would level such fabricated false accusations which hinge on false testimonies from terrorist individuals. At the same time, they overlook and ignore flagrant facts that testify to the utilization of armed terrorist groups, including ISIL, of chemical weapons against military personnel and civilians, time and again, including the seizure of a chloride gas factory 40 kilometers from Aleppo. I have received the following: that terrorists are plotting to use phosphoric, dangerous material against Syrian civilians, but they will disguise as Syrian military personnel, accusing the military personnel of committing those crimes, as they do now when they killed Imran, and they are trying to affect you and affect public opinion by spreading those photos. Those dangerous chemical material are situated 20 kilometers from Idlib, and they are situated in 6 barrels in a warehouse in Aleppo. On the 6th of September, 2 weeks ago, that situation, that warehouse, which contains yellow phosphor material, that place was visited by 2 American experts. They left them to Turkey. This is what has been given to me, and I am presenting the information to the Council, like hundreds of other pieces of information regarding the terrorist actions in my country. Those who commit crime wars in Syria are well known. They are the ones who killed 200 civilians in the town of Manbij, those who bombarded a school for the mute and the deaf in Darqa, and those who targeted the Syrian army in Deir ez-Zor, backing Daesh, and those who provided all kinds of support for hundreds of thousands of terrorists who were brought from 100 countries in accordance with your reports, the reports of this very council, for many years. We are the most desirous to stem Syrian bloodshed and put an end to the protracted Syrian suffering. Proceeding from this, we welcomed the recent US-Russian agreement on fighting Daesh and the Nusra Front and their allies, and to differentiate between al-Nusra and the so-called the moderate armed opposition groups, and to stop hostilities for 1 week. For 1 week. While we were committed to that agreement, those who employ terrorist groups in Syria told the latter to reject the agreement. Immediately after that declaration, more than 20 armed terrorist groups expressed their rejection of the agreement, including the Nuruddin Zenki and Al-Nusra groups, as well as the Ahrar al-Sham. That rejection was accompanied by targeting the positions of the Syrian army on the Castillo Road and other positions. They violated that agreement before its expiry 300 times, which led to the martyrdom of 200 civilians and 157 military personnel, in addition to hundreds who sustained serious wounds. In a deliberate scheme to sabotage this agreement, the military aircraft of the so-called international coalition led by the United States bombarded the positions of the Syrian Arab military, or the positions of the Syrian Arab army, which is fighting Daesh in Deir ez-Zor. This is not the first time that these groups commit such a crime. It is really deplorable that some on this council, in addition to senior UN officials, including the UN Secretary General, continue to call on the Syrian government and its allies to adhere to the agreement of the cessation of hostilities, despite different evidence on the ground that proved since the beginning that those countries were backing armed terrorist groups that have never had and will never have the intention or the desire to crown this endeavor with success. This was abundantly clear in the breaches by the armed terrorist groups of the agreement and by the so-called the international coalition, which were involved directly or indirectly. Worse still, that the United States did shrek its main obligation, namely to differentiate between a Nusra Front and those whom it insists on their classification as moderate opposition military groups. This led to undermining all that has been made during the 5 long years of that war, which is imposed on our country, which clearly shows the absence of the political will of those who sponsor terrorism to stop the bloodbath, as if the objective was to neutralize the Syrian forces instead of finding a solution. Is it not about time that those who are on this council, who continue to lie to themselves and to public opinion, to insist on the protection and supporting what you so sometimes call the moderate opposition and sometimes the moderate armed opposition? All these armed groups are only many faces of one coin, namely terrorism, which boomeranged, it backfired, and attacked your capitals with their practices, terrorist actions, and their extremist ideology. And because of your erroneous policies and practices to date. Would anybody under this dome, in this hall, have the courage to justify the the support that you extended for 4 years in the form of hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of tons of weaponry to the Nuruddin Zinki terrorist group, which chopped the head of the Palestinian child in the Handarat camp that you lament today. This faction has revealed your false political media campaigns that they are moderate opposition when they declared that they belong to the Al-Nusra Front. It is incumbent on certain members on this council to stop their exploitation of the Syrian people suffering that they created themselves by their military, political, and financial support. The politicization of the Syrian crisis will only lead to the prolongation of this crisis and the increase of the plight of Syrian people in the service of well-vested narrow interests, far removed from humanitarian goals. Our commitment to fight terrorism goes hand in hand with the future of their country without any foreign intervention. As for solutions imposed from abroad, they are completely and categorically rejected by the Syrian government. Here we have to stress that any political solution can only be successful by providing the requisite conditions through intensified efforts to fight terrorism and through pushing ahead with the reconciliation processes that were successful in many regions. Therefore, everybody should understand that the real war on terrorism has never started yet. The advent of a Syrian victory is imminent, and this victory will further the implementation of Security Council resolution in the maintenance of international peace and security. I have information regarding what happened in Deir ez-Zor, and I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement, and I now give the floor to Special Envoy de Mistura to respond to your comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do respond to one specific question, which was very precise and very clearly raised by the distinguished ambassador of the Russian Federation. First, I would like to reply that I'm guided by the Geneva Communiqué and by the Resolution 2254, both on the agenda and on the invitations. I have in the past, and here is the reply, witnessed refusals for active direct talks from the HNC, who did set preconditions. I did also get, and I did ask the ambassador, who was also the representative of the government in Geneva, whether they wanted to have at the time direct talks with the current delegations and the present, at least. And please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Ambassador, you did indicate that you didn't want to discuss with terrorists or representative of terrorists or participants of terrorists. I can confirm that when I will be sending the invitations, and obviously the political process cannot be hostage of the security environment, at the same time, let me make a quote here, when we had that special day, because I consider it still a special day, or evening if you want, 9th of September, of the long, very detailed discussion between the Russian Federation and the United States, I made a statement on behalf of the UN, and I said the following: the United Nations hopes that implementation of this understanding will facilitate, no precondition, but will facilitate renewed efforts to reach a Syrian-owned and Syrian-led political settlement of the conflict as called in by the Geneva Communique and Security Council Resolution 2254. And I will be then proceeding to consult the Secretary General and the ISSG in order to be able to launch it. So that's still my hope. And I can confirm, therefore, that when I will send these invitations as per 2254, I will do that for direct talks. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic has asked for the floor to make a further statement. I give you the floor.
شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Madam President. A simple clarification and comment to what the Special Envoy has stated. When the Geneva II conference was held, with a view to preparing for the Geneva conference, the conference charged Jordan with defining which is terrorist and which is not, and to Saudi Arabia to determine who is in the opposition and who is not. And so that we take these two definitions from these two countries to Geneva with us. Neither this or the other took place. Neither Jordan prepared such a definition, nor did Saudi Arabia. And the problem was again referred to the Geneva conference. And we found that there were terrorists invited to the Geneva conference. And they were excluded afterwards, because everyone found out that they were terrorists. The Syrian government, on the other hand, went to Geneva once and again, and will return to Geneva to engage in an inter-Syrian dialogue, not a Syrian terrorist dialogue, an inter-Syrian dialogue without outside interference and without any impositions. And therefore, we need the special representative, the special envoy, to gather all these opposition groups in one delegation that would come to negotiate with the delegation of the Syrian Arab Republic. We're not prepared to negotiate with terrorists, nor with hundreds of armed terrorist groups that were genetically altered. We are a government that is prepared to negotiate with one united delegation of the national opposition that truly desire an inter-Syrian settlement without outside interference. We do not consider all the opposition as terrorists, as was suggested by the statement of the special envoy. However, we would like to negotiate with those who believe in Syria and in the future of Syria and the dialogue amongst the Syrians, without having them being used by external agendas. I reiterate, the Syrian government is prepared to return to Geneva and to resume the dialogue, but not with the deaf, nor the mute, nor the blind. We want to resume the dialogue with Syrians like us, nationals like us, who believe in our country and do not serve external agenda and spend their days in five-star hotels and get paid by governments that use them in cheap tricks. Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam.
Okay. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.